Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Today is another weekly wrap up and I'm so excited because we actually have 13 books to talk about, ranging from a new 6-star read to some pretty lowly rated books, but we're not going to waste any time because I have a lot to say about a lot of these books. So first off, I want to welcome a new channel member, which is Cozy Core Crafts, which is my friend Tara. Thank you so much, Tara, for supporting me here as a channel member. I did want to give a plug to channel memberships because I know I talk about Patreon the most. That has been something that, it's just been over a year that I've been doing Patreon and it has literally changed my life. It's been amazing. But channel memberships are something that is native here to YouTube, and they're actually a more maybe affordable option for supporting the channel if you don't know. I know many channels have channel memberships. They're a great opportunity that YouTube provides, especially for some content that doesn't end up being advertiser friendly, which, since I like to talk about alien dick on this channel, that ends up being a lot. So between Patreon and channel memberships, that really is what helps me be able to do this full time. So definitely check out the link in my description or the join button, and you'll see that I have 4 different options for channel memberships, including anything above Dedicated Diva gets you early access to all of my videos, and if you join at the Faded Friend level, you actually get monthly private live chats with me and other members, and that has been something I've been loving to do for well over 2 years now. It's been amazing. So again, thank you to Tara for becoming a channel member, and thank you to all my channel members who helped me keep doing this. You guys were some of the first people who supported me that way, and so I always have a soft spot for my channel members, who I know a lot of you do both because you're crazy and you're amazing. But yeah, definitely check that out if you're looking for a way to support the channel. And again, YouTube makes it really easy because it's, they obviously want there to be channel memberships because they're a part of that as well. So let's go ahead and dive into these books. As usual, my notes are down here, so I might be referencing that at some points. And also any books that I'm mentioning in this video, I have affiliate links down below if you choose to buy them through Amazon. That is another way to support the channel too. If there are books that you already want to buy, you can check out those links, and that will support me as well. All right, so the first book that I ended up finishing was actually a huge surprise to me. I mean, it wasn't a surprise that I was going to read it, but it was a surprise about how much I loved it. So I even made a reel about this recently. So some people were like, what? And that's actually The Villain by L.J. Shen. So I don't talk about L.J. Shen, that's the whole thing. She's an author that I actually used to read a decent amount of, maybe about 5 years ago. Then there was some controversies with her. I think some people still feel the controversies with her, but I also just wasn't really loving her books. They were feeling kind of sameness to me. And so I took a step back and I just wasn't that interested in picking them up. But one of the beauty of my patrons is that when they choose a book for me to annotate, unless I very strongly feel like I don't want to read it, which of course I have veto power over that, but I really try to just go with the flow because sometimes I find really amazing books, and this is a case of that. Okay, so yes, The Villain by L.J. Shen. This book is, I think, book 2 in the Boston Bells, so I was jumping into a second one, but this one is kind of billed as a Hades and Persephone retelling, but there's also a lot of awareness that they're a Hades and Persephone retelling, so it's also not at the same time. But this one ends up being kind of a marriage of convenience / a marriage of saving for Persephone, who she is in a lot of debt that her ex-husband got her into and then ditched, and so she's being threatened by his debt collectors to be turned into their whore, basically, to pay off her debt. And so she actually goes to her sister-in-law's brother-in-law, which ends up being, I think this one is Killian. Yeah, this is Killian. She goes to him, which is an odd choice for her. I mean, she's always had some feelings for him, even before she married her deadbeat husband, who is now an ex-husband. Or not quite an ex-husband. That's actually part of what he helps her get this divorce finalized. But he's very unfeeling. He's very much, seen as kind of being a sociopath. Although through this story we find out that there's very specific reasons that he's she's acting like this. And I will say I can't speak specifically to how Tourette syndrome is represented in this book, because there is some representation of a, you know, condition slash like chronic situation, and I know that's like a bit of a spoiler for me to say, but it's also kind of a content warning at the same time. For me, it worked how it was being used in the story, but I can absolutely see why some people would then find it offensive how it's being used in this story. So I'm just laying it out on the table. I'm also not saying that I'm ready to completely dive into the LJ Shen fan club by any means. I just ended up having a wild fucking ride with this book because I was not expecting to like it. And what was funny is that, you know, I warned my patron kind of, I was like, I don't know, I don't really read LJ Shen, but if you really want me to read this book, like, you just have to be prepared that my comments might not be nice, because I'm also not going to lie in my annotations. Many of my patrons can speak to that, of sometimes me being like, hey, you asked me to annotate this, you're getting my raw reactions to it. So if it's not one of my favorite books that I'm revisiting, you might be in for an interesting scenario, right? You just might be. So anyway, so this ends up being a marriage of convenience. He agrees to marry her because he wants an heir, and he realizes that having someone who's like in his debt and like needs him could be the perfect way to keep this marriage in the perfect little box that he wants to keep it in, which is he doesn't want to have any feelings for his wife, and he just wants to be able to, well, honestly, he wants to be able to use in vitro to get her pregnant so that he never has to engage with her in sex at all. He wants to save all his dirty, sexy feelings for paid professionals. And because Persephone, you know, has wanted him before for whatever reasons, her reasons for wanting him seem to be purely physical to me. And so I'm kind of like, girl, what are you getting yourself into with this? Just because you want that dick? Like, what are you doing? But how she ends up challenging him is he sets up all these rules. There's this contract she's supposed to sign, but he also makes it that she'd never be, she also says, but we're never going to get divorced. You're not going to leave me. We're going to stay together. But the thing is, once they're actually in this scenario, she's like, I'm not using in vitro. That's not how we're going to do this. We're going to have sex. You're going to be home by certain times so that we can spend time together, because we're not going to be raising our kids this way. And he's just like, but the contract. And the thing that Persephone does, which is just a fucking master move in my mind, where I was very afraid that she was just going to be weak because, right, she wants him. He's now agreed to marry her. Is this going to be her chasing her husband the whole time? Because I'm not interested in reading that. I'm not interested in seeing the girl pine and pine away the whole time and there be nothing from him. And though it's very clear that she wants him the whole time and that she, you know, does want to find a way in which he'll want her, she also isn't going to beg on the floor for it. And so when he's like, oh, no, we're going to have sex just during the time that's appropriate. I want you to take an ovulation test so I know when the best time is to come in and impregnate you. She's like, no, that's not how we're doing it. And he's like, but the rules. And she's like, here's the thing about your contract. What can you do to me? Because you're not going to divorce me. You said you're not going to do that. And you're not going to leave me. So what are you going to do? If I don't give you access to me to impregnate me, how are you going to do it? And so she really does have him by the balls, and he is like, well, fine, I'm going to start showing up for this, and I'm going to do this. And so he starts doing all of these things to make her happy, and in so doing, starting to fall for her as well. And again, as I've said, there is something that has to do with Tourette syndrome in here. There also is an enemy and these enemies' children that get involved in this story, and so there's a content warning for children being abused, and also, like I said, for some people, and I say it for some people not to be like whether I think it's offensive or not. It's not my place to decide whether it's offensive or not. I don't know. I saw like both things in reviews for this book. Some people saying it was offensive, some people claiming that like, well, the way that it was used for the story was very interesting. I don't know, but I had a crazy ride. I liked how the heroine pushed back, and so I ended up giving this book 5 stars, and mostly because I was shocked, okay? So much of the 5-star rating for this one came because I was absolutely shocked that I was having a good time with this book when I expected to hate it. So yeah, I gave it 5 stars. It was a 3.5 on the spice scale. There was some degradation. There's rough sex. She's really willing sexually to let him do whatever he wants to her, which, I mean, I'm here for. But then she wasn't like, but you still need to treat me with respect. Like, we're not doing that outside the bedroom. And I loved it. So yeah, moving right along. Then I read It Started With a Scandal by Julie Ann Long. This was one of my 12 recs from 12 friends, and this one was from Jessin at Jessin Reads Romance, or Smart Women Read Romance on Instagram. And so I was very certain that I would enjoy this book. I remember when she was binging through the Pennyroyal Green series. This one is actually number 10 in the series, but from what she's told me and what I gather from reading this book, it isn't about like one of the main like maybe like family members or like people in the series, and so it can be read as a standalone, which we all know 95% of most historicals can be read as a standalone, but there's still the fact of sometimes you want to read the whole series. But Jessin read the whole series. This is like, I think, her favorite one or one of her favorite ones, and what she recommended to me. So this one is a housekeeper and basically like an exiled French prince, and he has bought this small home because he needs to be able to buy back his birthright, because it was like taken in the revolution, and if he's not able to get the funds to buy it back, he's going to lose it. So he has this small estate right now that he's living on. He's also been injured in his job, which is kind of like, he's a spy and he works for the British government, and you know, that's kind of why he's been able to keep some of his social standing and everything after what's happened and stuff. And so our heroine is actually a single mom who has been kind of ostracized for being a single mom. And she gets hired to be his housekeeper and really kind of has to battle a lot of the staff as well as keep him happy, because he's only giving her a fortnight of trial period, which is 2 weeks time in case you didn't know. And she just goes about writing his life for him. It's amazing. And so this book just completely enchanted me and won me over. It definitely has like the grumpy sunshine. The little boy is a treat. You know, I just love the single mom life. Okay, I love the single moms so much. In fact, I read so many single moms this week. It's crazy how that happened. This whole month, actually, I've read a lot of single moms. So, yeah, her name is Elise and his name is Philippe, and they just slowly start to fall for each other. And I mean, obviously there's class difference. There's also, she refuses to be anyone's mistress. She's already, you know, paid a high price for following her heart. And she's not willing to risk that again. Philippe is in a tight spot because he has two choices. He can either marry well to be able to buy his home back, or he can continue to do work for the British government and risk death, basically being a spy and stuff like that. So those are his two options. So really neither option includes him being able to marry his housekeeper. So we're in a pickle. But the things about this book that completely won me over is the absolutely beautiful, sweet gestures between these two. Some that they knowingly do, and some that the other character isn't even aware of that they do until much later on. There is letter writing, both to like, usually like on their behalf to someone else, which I think is really beautiful. And then also like secret gifts, and the way that Philippe is with her son, the way the staff is with her son, actually. And it's just beautiful. Like, honestly, it was just a beautiful, beautiful book. It's very low on the spice. It's a very slow burn between these two. It's definitely a forbidden scenario. So, like, there's so much longing and mutual pining, but yet it was still clever and fun, and there was clever things happening in this book. And so I was totally won over for it. I'll absolutely be reading more Julie Ann Long for sure. So this is a 5-star. It was only a 1.5 on the spice scale, but like I said, like, I didn't miss it. I was completely entranced by this story, and I wasn't like needing more spice to be happening by any means. All right, then I read Hard Love by Sarah Ney. As I've shared, the day that you're seeing this video, there is an interview with Sarah Ney on my channel at 6 p.m. I'm very excited to interview her, but I needed to catch up on some of her books because it's been a while since I've read them. So I read one of them last week, and then this week I read, where did we go? My thing just messed itself up. I read Hard Love, which of course is another sports romance. And this one is about Trace and Chandler. So Trace is the like twin brother to one of the other brothers, and then Chandler is the cousin to that one's love interest. So they basically meet at the wedding of this other couple, and they just are super awkward and like don't get on, and then his family, I believe, kind of encourages him to ask her out on a date and have it be maybe kind of public so that they can kind of fix this little bit of a rift that's happening. And then there also involves this really sweet neighbor girl who like walks his dog for him, who is kind of helping him with dating advice, which I thought was also kind of interesting. So, I mean, it was really cute. The thing that I'll say about like the heroes in this, they act kind of dumb. And I don't mean that harshly because these are rom-coms, but I'm also kind of the person that I don't always love that humor has to be because the people act dumb. That kind of can rub me the way sometimes, but the audiobooks are pretty fun with this. The male narrator really goes for it with his narration, so that's cool. So I still have a fun time listening to these while I was working on some cross stitch, shall we say. All right, so I gave this one 3.5 stars, and it was a 2 on the spice scale. Had some grumpy sunshine, and of course, this one, he's a football player. This one is, his brother is a baseball player. So yeah, it was a great time. It's definitely... I feel like her books are very bingeable and it's easy to get swept away in them. So definitely a decent read for sure. Next, I finally read a fanfic. I've been wanting to read some fanfic this month. And you know, obviously that's on the lower priority when I have so many books that I like have to get to. But I read The Lilac Tree by Lena 1987. And this one is a Snamini fic. And it actually involves, so it's kind of told in like a past and present time. So during the past, during the war, there was a marriage law that happened. And so Snape and Hermione ended up getting married when she was still in school. And so we know that that has happened. Now it is after the war, and it's actually almost 3 years after the war. And we see Snape every day going to visit his wife at St. Mungo's. And she had been cruciated, or however we make that into a verb, by Bellatrix so much that she has lost her mind the way that the Longbottoms did. But now we are working on a cure for that. We're working on a way to be able to fix her for that. And so we have Neville and Lavender and Luna and... is it Luna and... I don't know. But we have a bunch of people working on a cure for this. And so Snape, who him and Hermione had never... consummated their marriage yet. They had only ever even shared a kiss during the time they were married because she was underage. He'd only married her to protect her from this marriage law so that, and also to protect him being undercover. We've seen that in other fics before. She was the best one to marry Snape because she was aware of his undercover work. And he was also expecting to die in the war, and then he was, you know, expecting to kind of free her from it. But instead what happened is he is, you know, still married to her, and now she's the one who's having a lot of, you know, memory issues and stuff. And so every day he goes to see her, and at some point she'll remember who she is, and it's just heartbreaking to see. I feel like this could be very triggering for people who have been around loved ones who have memory troubles or suffered with Alzheimer's or dementia, so just be aware of that. But then what happens in this story pretty quickly into this, like it doesn't take forever, they have found a cure for this. So now we're cured, but do they stay married? Because the marriage law, which was imposed during the war, like isn't there anymore. So her family and her loved ones are like, well, now you can get divorced from him. It's perfect. And she's like, he's the only one who stuck by me. All the rest of you stopped coming to visit. You stopped checking in on me. If it wasn't for Snape, I would have never had my memory back. So why would I leave him now? And that's where we're at with the Lilac Tree. So I really enjoyed this one. I do recommend it. The issue for me came with what happens with fics a lot. It ended up being very drawn out, even for not being a super long fic. It ended up being very drawn out and then very quickly over. You know, like their build up to figuring it out. But here's the thing. There's a lot of romance novels, a lot of stories that's how the authors want to tell the story. So that's kind of a taste preference. But it was very beautiful, lots of mutual pining, you know, them forced proximity. They end up living together when she gets out of the hospital. And it was really sweet. Like, I had a great time with it, but I ended up giving it a 3.5 star when all was said and done because I feel like it could have done more. And it had a 2 on the spice scale. Then, once I finished The Lilac Tree, I read His Grace the Duke by Emily Rath. I'm not actually going to spend too much time on this book. This was supposed to be a buddy read with Rachel from Rachel Reads and Sings, and because we buddy read Beautiful Things together, which I actually rated pretty highly. I had a good time with Beautiful Things. It was setting up this why choose scenario between Renly, James, Burke, and Rosalie. It was setting up this why choose scenario. We have a sailor, we have a bastard, we have a second son. Well, they're technically all second sons, but in different ways. And then we have Rosalie. And I enjoyed the first one, but I felt like the characters kind of all blended together. It also doesn't help that like all of them have second names, because that happens in historical romances. But when you have 4 people to keep track of and then you add double names in there, dear God, does it get confusing. Okay, it gets confusing. There's no other way to say it. And they also, even though they're supposed to feel distinct, the only one who really feels distinct is like James. And so I ended up being really let down with this one. Rachel DNF'd this. This was long. It was 560 pages. The audiobook was like 16 hours long or some shit. I might have made that up. I don't know if it's that long. But like, it just was not well paced. Of course, this one added a lot more sex into it. There was MM and MMMF stuff happening in here. There is the men falling for each other as well. But to me, it wasn't that well set up. Besides the one MM couple in here who definitely have had mutual pining before, there was only one of the men who had ever even been with men before, even though the one was kind of in love with the other. He'd never been with a man before. So there was only one bisexual man in here to begin with, but they all ended up being okay with MM and MMF stuff by the end. And I just didn't buy the journey, especially when we're in a very dangerous time for them to be doing that. The epilogue was very heartwarming at the end to see them and all their children that are running around there. And I did like seeing Rosalie's arc from her in the first book, where she was like, I don't want to be married or tied down, and seeing what they were able to come up with so that she wouldn't feel tied down was interesting. But overall, yeah, like the pacing was whack. I couldn't tell you the difference between these guys, again, besides James by the end. And so it really fell into the weaknesses I think a lot of reverse harems do, and is kind of the reason why I don't enjoy reading them, even though it did have the MM and MMFM stuff in it that I do want to see. It failed on the other aspects. And so it goes back to what I always think happens with these. I am still willing to try her contemporary reverse harem. I will try those, but this ended up being a not so great. And I gave it a 3-star because I did finish it. It does have a 4.5 on the spice scale for that, or a 5 on the spice scale probably, we could say. What did I give it? I gave it a 4. Okay. And there was some spanking and bondage and some voyeurism. But, geez, where is it? Yeah, bondage, exhibitionism. Yeah, it could have been better. It could have been better. Okay, I had my stuff all messed up on here, guys. There we go. Okay, then I was able to get the 3rd volume of The Titan's Bride. And I read this all in one sitting. So yeah, this is volume 3, where we ended volume 2. Caius was going to try to send his bride home, but what he didn't tell him is that if he sent his bride home, it would probably cost Caius his life to do that. And so right at the beginning, we have some friends intervening saying, don't let him send you home. He's going to kill himself to send you home. You can't go home. You need to stay here. And Kyatsu is like, Kyochi, is like, why didn't you tell me? And he's like, I just want you to be happy. And he's like, you've only ever wanted me to be happy. I think it's time for me to stay here. And then they go about working on a way for the little human to be able to take completely his giant. So they go on this journey to meet this sexual expert elf who is supposed to basically help him sexually train himself to be able to take him. So that's the journey that we're on now. This was very enlightening. The things that make me a little nervous is that I feel that Mpreg is going to end up being in this, because Caius is very sure that if he tries hard enough, he'll be able to breed his bride and be able to have an heir with his bride. And even when they're having sex, like Kyochi will be like, you know, I'm a man, right? I can't have a baby. But it's a magical fantasy world, so Mpreg may end up entering this story, and I don't know how I feel about that. It is one of my kind of like hard lines. Like, I don't love reading that. So we shall have to see where it ends up going. But I gave that one 4 stars. It was very sweet. I had a wonderful time with it. And it had a 2.5 on the spice scale. It has size difference and breeding, because whether or not the breeding will take, that's definitely what he's working on. So there we go. Then I had a reread of Tempt Me at Twilight by Lisa Kleypas. This was for a patron as well. There's not a ton I have to say about this. I did make a story post about this though, where if you love dark romance, there are aspects, I mean, in a lot of the Hathaway books, but there are aspects in this book. I guess I do have it right here. Tempt Me at Twilight. Rereading this book, I mean, I always love rereading her books, but seeing those aspects of Harry that are definitely like a billionaire dark romance vibes within this, you know, fun historical vibes, because he meets Poppy, he decides he wants her even though she's in love with someone else, and he goes about making it impossible for her to marry that man, and then swooping in to offer himself as the right choice. Of course, it doesn't quite go off the way that he wants, because number one, he thinks that now that he's won her, that that's all he needed, that he just needed to win her and he'll be happy, not realizing that, you know, I kind of actually want her to love me maybe, even though I didn't think that I did. And now have I ruined that, any chance of her to love me with my actions? So we'll have to see. But this one's a 5-star read for me. It's a 2 on the spice scale, but it is absolutely beautiful. All right, then we get into kind of the rough part of the week, where things took a bit of an unfortunate like downturn in quality for me. So I read Jerk by Daryl Banner. This was one of the books for the ABCs of Love readathon, obviously the J. This live show is postponed 2 weeks until either the 9th or the 10th. We have to pick which day, so I'll share that when we do. I was pretty excited to read this. God, I need to stop being excited to read these, y'all. I need to lower my expectations and not be so excited to read them. Yeah, so this one is an romance, and it starts with a hero named Romeo, who goes by Rome, that is a nice guy. And it starts with him trying to find Mr. Right for himself, and it's just not happening. And there's this guy that he really has a crush on and he really likes, who works at the gym that he goes to, because he started working out just to help himself feel better, to feel stronger. And he has a thing for Danny. Well, Danny has a boyfriend, and this boyfriend is a jerk. And through this story, which actually takes place over a good amount of time, Romeo discovers that the more of a jerk that he is, the more like dates that he gets. So he starts acting more and more like Danny's jerky boyfriend. He starts becoming that himself. And when eventually he actually gets the chance to be with Danny, which again like takes a while, he is so much like this boyfriend, this ex-boyfriend, that it's like, for Danny, he's like, well, I just got away from a guy who was like this, and now you're acting like this too. And then it causes Romeo, you know, to have to rethink it. So I won't go into all my thoughts about this, because, you know, I want you to turn into our live show, which is sure to be a hoot. But I did give it 2 stars, and it was a 2 on the spice scale. And it did have lots of other men in this, because he's, you know, dating other people, trying to find people. So yeah. Then there was Kisses by Christine Duggar, which is for K. This one had more potential, and I didn't hate this one. This one was a professor and a student romance. They meet out at a bar one night, end up having a one-night stand, and then she discovers he's a professor, and eventually it leads to them having an illicit affair type scenario. But it had a lot of other aspects in it that I don't enjoy. And so, one, including the way that it was written, which I always tell you, if a book gets in its own way, so much so that I have trouble like getting through it because of the writing itself, not even writing style or whatever, just like literally the way the words are put together was weird. Like this one didn't use contractions. It would say like I am instead of I'ms, or it is not instead of isn't, like all the time. And then randomly there'd be a don't put in there, and I'm like, okay, you did not have a consistent like editor for this, because it was so strange how it's written. But anyway, gave that one 3 stars, and it was a 3 on the spice scale. It might be one of the spicier ones in this, and it actually had some spanking and some sex happening at school, you know, so there was some possible exhibitionism. I also read Break for Me by Ada Pre, which is a fic that I finished last night. This one was a Dramini fic. This one, Hermione and Draco like work together at the Ministry of Magic. They're in their early 30s at this point, and when they're on a job, they're trying to catch a counterfeiter and like this smuggler who's smuggling potions, and Hermione gets hit with this cocktail of potions that on one aspect is a fertility drug and on the other aspect is a lust potion. So, and it's a double whammy lust potion. So she's going to feel lustful for men around her and be more fertile, and the men around her are going to lust for her. And this is the aspects of this potion are supposed to last 48 hours. And so Draco kind of volunteers to help her and is supposed to look out for her and make sure that no one gets to her and tries to impregnate her, and make sure that she also isn't trying to be impregnated by anyone else. But of course, you know, he's supposed to be able to occlude enough to resist her. But, you know, that only works so well because he already kind of has a crush on her before we ever fully get into it. So they end up being kind of like locked in a room together for the weekend with lust flowing all around them. So I thought this one was really sweet. This one was very sexy, but it also had a lot of like resist happening. So I had a fun time with this one. I gave this one 4 stars, and it's a 3 on the spice scale maybe. So lots of dirty talk happening. There's a point where he's like, the potion will give you a break if you have like an orgasm. So, you know, like, use me to have an orgasm, but like, I'm not going to touch you. So just imagine how that would work out. It was a good time. Okay. The 2 books we have the most to talk about. So this one, I know is going to be controversial for some people, but it doesn't need to be controversial because everyone can have their own opinions. And I'm perfectly fine with any of my friends who are just loving this book. But I know that not everybody is. And that's Liars Like Us by JT Geisinger. This is the first book in her Morally Grey series, which is really kind of cool. It does in certain ways connect with her other books. And there's a wonderful interview on Lacey's channel with JT where she talks about that she kind of has this overall vision for her books that are kind of leading to this culminating series, which has me very excited for some potential. I'm not going to speak to that because I don't want to spoil it, and I don't even know. So I'm not even going to talk about my theories for it yet until we get closer. But before I go into what I liked and what I didn't like about this book, I want to say that I am absolutely still reading all of the books in this series. I still love JT Geisinger, y'all know, but I was pretty let down with this one. And I know some of it just comes from, you know, I didn't get an arc for this one. So I was seeing, you know, when I start to see everyone else's opinions about how much they love it, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be the next like Queens and Monsters. I'm like ready for it. But it didn't quite get there for me. And I'm going to like boil that down to a few things of like what didn't work for me. But first let's kind of start with what I did like and what was great. So the setup for this one is that it is a marriage of convenience. Our heroine is a bookstore owner, and this huge conglomerate bookstore just opened up next door and is going to put her out of business. And she is out talking with her employees one night who are also her friends, and they're talking out to eat about how like she's gonna have to close because there's no way they're gonna make the money for rent, which is being doubled, and now they're having less people come in because there's competition across the street, and so she's really in trouble. And then the next day at work, our hero Callum comes in and offers her a deal. And really, you know, it's right in chapter 2. He's like, I want you to marry me. And he has this tale of how his father is a big family man and is really disappointed that he isn't married and carrying on the family name yet, even though he has 3 brothers and even though he's super successful. And so he has to get married by the end of the year or else he'll lose his inheritance and be cut off. And what's kind of funny is that our heroine calls BS on this right away and is number one, like, why do you want to marry me? Why am I the right person to do it? And he's like, well, I overheard you at this restaurant, and like, because you need this so badly, I know that this marriage will work out the way that I want it to, because I'll give you $10 million if you marry me, and you'll be able to keep your employees going, and you'll be able to keep your family's dream going. It'll be great. And she's like, okay, there's a few things. And so she lists out all these things of like, are you that bad with your money that if your dad cut you off, you wouldn't have anything? How are you able to give me $10 million? Wouldn't you be able to live off of that $10 million without me? Like, all of these things, right? These are getting thrown. And he has answers for all of these or whatever. And so she says no initially, but I won't spoil all the details of this. That's not what I'm here to do. But eventually this deal is struck and they agree. And then now he has her in his grasp. And he immediately is very possessive, but also just lavishes her with things, with cars, with money, with, you know, making sure her business is everything she needs. He's giving her all these. And eventually they consummate their marriage. And eventually they're, you know, sharing a bed every night and having this amazing over-the-top sex. And I didn't buy it really at all. And that is where we get into what I didn't like, but we'll finish it off. Like, there's lots of references to Outlander. I know that will be really fun for people. The heroine really loves Outlander, and the hero at one point gets her something related to Outlander that will make all of our Outlander loving hearts just like, just stop. Okay. Like, I mean, it absolutely made mine stop. And would I throw myself at a billionaire's feet who was able to get me this thing that he gets her? Yes, I would. I would do many, many dirty things to a man if he got me what Callum gets for Emery. I absolutely would. But the thing too about having Jamie Fraser mentioned so much in a book, which he is, I should have like searched the document about how many times Jamie Fraser or Outlander's mentioned, is that it really just made me compare Callum to Jamie. And I know that's probably not what JT meant, but it kind of did, because that's also a marriage of convenience to save a woman from a dangerous situation. And Jamie Fraser would never do some of the things this man did, which that's not what we're going for. Jamie Fraser, he's his own morally gray type of thing, but he, not with Claire. With Claire, he's not so morally gray. So anyway, this is the morally gray series, right? So what problems could I have had with the trickery and the obsession and the possession? And again, for me, it comes down to a few things. And let's see if this will sit up, because it might fall, but we'll put it up there for now so I can stop holding it. The main issues that I have fell into a few things, and to say those without spoilers, they fit into the fact that, number one, this only has Emerys POV. Now, there are reasonings for that, and, you know, JT, again, in the interview, which was very lovely. Of course, I love hearing her thoughts on, like, why she did it, but I also kind of call BS on some of her reasons that she says, because I've read almost all of JT's books, and I know that she can have a hero's POV who has a secret and still not reveal everything in the secret, okay? There's a lot of references to Aiden and Pen Pal. Aiden and Pen Pal has a secret and knows a secret, and we get his POV, and he still keeps the secret until the end. We don't know the secret till the end. Also, Declan, Daddy Declan, he has a secret that is a big part of the plot, and we still have his POV, and I didn't know his secret until it's revealed. Killian has secrets, and we get his POV, and they're not revealed. So you see my pattern here. That excuse of like, if I gave his POV and showed his obsession, it would ruin it. That doesn't work, because JT is a very talented writer, and I know she could have. And I know she said there's a bonus chapter we'll be getting later on that is his POV. And maybe this man is just so obsessed that any words that he thought would completely give away the plot, but I doubt it. Also, what I also put forward is that what the secret was, yes, the full extent of the secret I did not know, but I had guessed 90% of what was going on. It's just that last little bit that I was like, oh my God, wow, okay, his obsession is huge, big, large. But there were hints to all the other things. So why couldn't we have his POV when he's like doing some of those things that we're able to guess that he's doing, like we know he's the one doing? And then I could have seen the obsession from his point of view, because when we get to a part of the book where like love is getting thrown around, there are people in this book telling the heroine, he loves you. He never would do this for another woman. He's obsessed with you. He loves you. I'm like, how? When? Why? The biggest question I had when I got to the end of this book and I find out the full extent of everything, I said, why? Because you have not shown me why. Now you could say some psychopaths, I'm not saying he's a psychopath, some people don't have a reason why. And I'm like, I don't buy it. And there isn't enough conversations with him to explain that. Again, I'm going to bring up my favorite dark romance. What's another very dark romance that I adore that only has one POV? Untouchable. But what does San Mariano do? She has the heroine have conversations with the hero where we understand his mind. So even though I've never fully had a chapter from Carter's POV, I understand Carter's thinking by the end of that book. And I felt like I knew him and why he did things by the end of the book. With Callum, I made it through this whole book. He's hot. He knows how to spank a girl around. He knows how to tie her up. He knows how to be sexy and say dirty things. But why? I don't know why. I don't know why. And so I think that also it comes down to this. And JT says this in her interview, and when she said it, I was like, that's it. And it doesn't make me hate this. I know I'm ribbing on it, but also, like, see the smile. This is still fun. It's still fun. But, you know, as my lovely Crystal just said recently on Instagram, fun, like, it's hard to quantify and, like, explain it in a review. We can say it's fun. Like, I said Fourth Wing is fun, and I stand by it. I had a fun fucking time with Fourth Wing, but that doesn't make the book perfect, right? And so this is a case for me of, like, I even had fun, but I also was very frustrated by the end because I know that JT can do better than this and make me believe the wackiness of a hero and the absolute utter devotion that they have. And all I had was third party's word on how he felt about her. I never got it from him. And so for me, at a point, every sex scene after the first one, which the first one, they both were just like overcome with it. Every one after the first one, I skimmed it because he's doing these very dirty things to her. And I'm just like, to me, she could be a blow up doll. She could be a blow up doll that he's doing it to, because I don't know why her. That is never answered for me. Why her? And I challenge anyone who's read it and loved it, and not in a bad way, like, tell me why. Tell me why her. Because even if, from his point of view, the why her is like, I saw this and this is what I've seen and this is it, well, then that's a why. That's a why. But for me, without spoiling it, when we find out why, I didn't buy it because I didn't see him experience it or live it or know what chord it struck deep inside of him to make it happen. So I hope it's clear. This is not an evisceration of this book by any means. I ended up with it at a 3.5 star and I rounded it up to 4 because I can't make myself give my queen a 3 star on anything. I'm just not that cold-hearted of a bitch. It was a 4 on the spice scale for me. There was some spanking, there was some bondage, of course there was dirty talk, of course there was some playing with the back end. But as I said in one of my reviews, no amount of ass play is going to win me over when I don't understand why. Where was I going with this? I said, one of the things that JT said in this interview was that she has never tried writing to the tropes before. She usually just writes the story and then what the tropes are, you know, there we go. And so she is writing this series to the tropes. And I know a lot of authors do that. Absolutely, I know a lot of authors do that. But to me, that kind of answered the question, because JT is a pantser. She lets the story go where she wants. And I kind of think she let the tropes tell her where the story wanted to go a little bit. Just from words from her own mouth and then this book that I read, which is still going to look beautiful on my shelves. And I'm still very excited for future books. She's confirmed that we will get all 3 brothers, the McCord brothers, Callum, Cole, and Carter. And one of them will be a reverse age gap. And there's a possibility for a 4th book when there's a character that will get introduced that we might love. So that's all she said. She's like, I'm not promising there's 4, but she's like with Queens and Monsters, which was just supposed to be 3 books, we all wanted Spider so bad that she wrote that book. She's like, there's a character that I could see people wanting their book so much that I might write it. So that gets me all very excited. I really hope that the next book, I Feel the Why. I also hope we get some hero POV, which we probably won't. This may be only a single POV series, but she also confirmed, have no fear what that means for the audiobooks, because these will all still have full casts and duet narration. So even though Emery is the one telling it, we're still going to have Troy Duran in there and a full cast of the female narrators. So the audiobook will still have it all. So again, I hope I didn't eviscerate this, but I just wanted to give my reasonings for what feels like a pretty harsh rating for a JT book. I still had a great time. I'm still going to listen to the audiobook of this. I still look forward to the other books in it. But I also had very high expectations. I work to keep expectations lower than they are, but with JT Geisinger, I just can't help it. She's one of my queens, and I had to. So we're going to move on, because the very last book that I finished was Reckless by Elsie Silver. And this one was a 6-star read and just blew me away. And at this point, I feel like a simp for Elsie Silver. I'm sure I'll fall off the cliff sometime, and one of the books I read won't be a 6-star book. But I think this one is so hard-earned for me because I really didn't expect to, like, love this book. Like, I was sure it was going to be a good time because, let's face it, I haven't been let down by one of her books yet. Even her books from her like first series, I've really enjoyed those books. You know, I gave 5 stars to Flawless and 6 stars to Heartless and Powerless, although Powerless I feel like is maybe more of a 5-star than a 6-star for me now looking at the series laid out. But Reckless made me really nervous. I know it's making a lot of people nervous because of what the tropes are, but I'm going to keep this 90% spoiler free because this book doesn't come out for 2 weeks, and I will have all the time in the world to gush about it once everyone has read it. But this book is a secret baby, and it is between Winter, who is Summer from Flawless, her older sister, who seems prickly, who seems bitchy, who seems cold and heartless and all these things. And we've seen her pop up in the previous 2 books. We saw her in Heartless when Willa ran into her at the hospital and they had a heart-to-heart moment. Winter's actually the one who tells her that she's pregnant, who tells Willa that she's pregnant. And then we see her a little bit in Powerless, which is actually kind of like we see that beginning in this again from the point of view of these 2. So Theo Silva is a bull rider. He is a mentee of Rhett's, and he actually gets invited to kind of this like pre-Christmas dinner, and it's actually the first dinner that Winter goes to as a part of this family. Like, she calls Summer, and Summer's like, come to this dinner, and so she does. And ends up being a really snowy, kind of like dangerous night. And when she's leaving there, Theo actually has her follow him to the hotel in town, which is where they're both staying. And they end up agreeing to have a one-night stand. So that is the setup of this. They have this one-night stand. And I, of course, won't give away any of the details of this. But then we have a time jump of a certain amount of time, and immediately your stomach falls. And for some people, this type of, this is why secret babies are tough. This is why they are tough to read for me as well. For me, I will say, and I'll say this, I feel like Elsie doesn't spend too much time wallowing in the events that lead this to be a secret baby, even though there's enough explanation that I'm like, I don't like this, but I understand how we got here. Now let's move on. And so we very quickly move along. And then we get all the beauty and manliness and stand-up dadness that is Theo Silva. And I said this, on my Instagram. Damn it. And I said this in my review, that I did not think it was possible for Elsie Silver to write me a hero that I would love more than Cade Eaton. But the bitch done did. and I love Theo with my whole soul. I love him as a dad. I love him as a partner. I love him as a human. He's definitely the sunshine to Winter's grumpy. When we see her again in this, she is a worn out single mom to a precious baby. And anytime Elsie like described this baby, I was like tearing up because there's just so much love for this child, like, which I knew was going to happen. And that was the thing, like when I was nervous about the secret baby, what I wasn't nervous about is that Winter was just going to steal my heart. Like I had a feeling that as long as Winter wasn't like vindictively keeping this baby a secret, which that's the only thing I'll say about how the baby's a secret. It is not a vindictive choice. It is not a vindictive choice how this happens. I was like, as long as she isn't vindictively doing this, which I was pretty sure Elsie wouldn't write a character who is vindictively doing it, but I've been burned by secret babies. I've been burned by the secret babies, so I was scared. As long as this wasn't a vindictive choice, I knew I was going to love Winter because this woman wanted a child so much. And we do briefly touch on her infertility issues with her first husband and the miscarriage of her child. And so the absolute like blossoming of her getting to be a mom after not thinking that she would, you know, there's this maturity of her of like, okay, if no one's helping me, like I'm going to do it. But she isn't alone. She isn't alone. And not just when we see Theo again and he gets inserted into this, but you know, Summer and Harvey and Sloane's mother and the whole crew, like none of them leave her alone. So she is not a one woman program, even though she wants to, even though it's hard for her to accept help. She accepts help of this family. And she accepts help from Theo when he gets the chance to give it. And dear God, the way this man reacts when he finds out about this baby, it's one of the most beautiful things that I've read in a long time. Like, whew. There's a reason why single parents is like one of my top tropes, and you know, dads are, and all of this. So secret baby's a difficult road to hoe, and I think you'll see lots of people say that about it. And for some people, the way it's kept a secret, it still won't be explained well enough, and that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine if it's a line for you. But for me, for someone who has very high expectations of secret baby for what my loopholes need to be, this one threaded the needle beautifully, and it gave us this beautiful couple. Okay, again, some like non-spoilery things, but like why this book has my heart, because it's a big thing to throw down when you say that you love someone more than Cade Eaton. Okay, like he's in my top 3 book boyfriends ever. Okay, he's way up there. But what works about Theo is he embodies the perfect supportive partner in all aspects. In the let me take your burdens, there's a particular scene that absolutely broke me, just broke me, where Winter, she is someone who like reacts, she like lashes out, she, you know, has had a very high expectations, and she feels like she needs to handle everything, and she wanted to be a mom so bad, so she's like, I can do this on my own, you know, I don't need someone coming in to save me. You know, she says, she's like, I don't need you coming in and playing the hero, like, even though she's happy to have him here, this isn't that kind of thing, but she's like, there's a certain situation happening where she's like, I don't need you coming in to save me, and he just is like, you're right, you don't, but I'm still here to offer help, and you should take it. Let me give it. This isn't because you need it. It's because I want to. And the way that he's able to like soothe her without like taking her dignity or trying to say she's being a bad mom or like push her out. He's like, woman, you're amazing. You've been doing this, you know, on your own and doing great. But I want help. And he does that in just the most beautiful ways, like just all across the board. Just the most stand-up, beautiful man, jumps in both feet, both arms, both feet, full heart, just like, I am here now, what can I do, is beautiful. And only a man like that, with a full open heart and patience, could be the right person for Winter, who is prickly and has been called cold and all these things. She needs someone who will be patient and who will love her that way. And so, yeah, like I said, I'll have even more to say as we go, but I hope you will go in with an open mind to this, and in Elsie we trust, because this book was beautiful. And I was so skeptical about this. I'll say it again. I did not want Theo and Winter pairing. You know, if you watch way back to my first time I read Heartless, I was excited for Winter, but I wanted her with Bo. That's what I wanted. I wanted the, like, injured soldier with the doctor, and, like, them working together. They'd both be broken. That's not what happened. And I was like, man, like, I don't want this. I don't want Theo. Like, I don't want a secret baby. Like, I was so up in my feels about it. And I stepped into this book, and I was just like, right before I started yesterday, I was very hesitant, because I'm like, oh God, like, what if I don't like it? Like, I'm scared. And then I just let it take me, and it's another favorite. So there we go. We still made this in under an hour. Look at that. Okay, everybody, I actually have one more book to talk about. I was going to cancel this and then just be like, oh, we'll skip that book. But I read another really great book that I skipped on my list. So, oopsie. Okay, earlier this week, I also read Surrendering to the Duke by Stevie Sparks, which was also on my KU books that I wanted to get to. And this was the one that on the list I wanted to read the most. So that's the one that I started with. Thank you to everybody who gave me suggestions on that video. I am reading some of those books in June from that list. So this one is actually set in 1921. This is a World War romance. And it is a single mom, a widowed mom. Her name is Emmeline, and the hero is actually her brother-in-law, who, she's a widow, so her husband had died during the war. It's now a couple years after the war, right? It's 1921, and she's been living on his family's estate with his sisters and his mom, and she has a little girl who's 6 years old now. And the mother-in-law kind of steps in to encourage Michael to marry Emmeline, because it'd be the perfect way to keep both her granddaughter there and this woman that she sees as a daughter herself now. And Michael, unbeknownst to his mother, which maybe she knew a little bit, Michael has actually had a thing for Emmeline before she ever even married his brother. But his brother proposed to her first, and so he didn't have the chance to have her for himself. And then, you know, she's been his brother's widow, and so he couldn't, you know, he couldn't make a move. And now he's back, and his mom is telling him, you should go for this girl. You should go for it. It would be the perfect solution. And so he does approach her, and he tries to kind of play it off like it's his mom's idea completely, even though inside he's like, I really want this for myself. I want her and my niece to always be here, and I want to love them. And the thing is, our heroine is an abuse victim, not from the brother. Like, her first husband was not the abusive one, but she was sexually assaulted and molested repeatedly by her uncle. And the reason she married the first Duke was actually because he discovered the situation she was in. And she's like an earl's granddaughter or something like that too. So she is like a member of the upper class, but she was an orphan. Both of her parents had died, so that's why she was living with her uncle, and he had been raping her for years. And the first Duke, he had a lover who was inappropriate for him, and he wanted to help this woman. And so he offered to make her his wife. He's like, I need an heir, but after that, like, I'll leave you alone and I'll save you. I'm going to bring you home to my family right now. So that's what he does, is he marries her and brings her home. But for her, like, she's still, like, she's very happy in her new life, but you know, their sexual life is never great. I mean, he's doing it to make an heir, and she's just trying to survive because the sexual trauma is very high for her. But this brother is very good to her, and she sees him as her hero. She really does, but he's died. But Michael doesn't know that. He doesn't know that his brother wasn't madly in love with her and that she wasn't with him. And when Michael proposes to her for a marriage of convenience, she says, I married for safety the first time. Now I'm safe. Your family has made me safe. And I know my daughter will be taken care of. So if I ever marry again, if I ever risk that again, I want to marry for love. And so she's kind of saying that as like, I'm sorry, Michael, I can't marry you. And he's like, well, wait. You know, he doesn't admit right away that he loves her already. He's like, well, how about you give me a chance to court you? Like, we don't have to get married tomorrow. There's no rush. He's still young. She's still young. You know, he's like, I don't need the heir right this minute. I don't need that. How about you let me court you? And so that's what they do. So a good portion of this book is them courting each other and her slowly seeing how devoted this man is to her. But they do still have some things to work through because, you know, she had been raped for many years. She'd been called horrible names for it. She'd been blamed for it by not only, you know, her uncle, but her cousin and her aunt all blamed her for the uncle's disgusting behavior. And then with her first husband, it was an act of like duty, and she would often drug herself before her husband came to her so that she could handle it. He did not know that. Just again, I really am not trying to villainize the first husband. Like, he did save her from this, and he did not know what she was doing. But when she reveals this to Michael, he, number one, is super angry. And he also is like, well, that won't be with us. So we're going to work on this. So this book has a lot of sexual healing happening. And it was such a beautiful story. It does have a little bit of a suspense element thrown in at the end that I thought was odd. But I really recommend this book for people who loved Downton Abbey. I know it's not like a perfect comparison, but it has that kind of historical vibe, like the turn of the tides. You know, like there's still corsets and some dresses used, but this cover is not a great representation. And the author has even admitted that, like, this is a debut book, y'all. This is a debut, and I was very impressed. I was very impressed by this book. It's why I had to mention it at the end, even though I was all like, yay, Reckless was the best book. But I have to talk about this because it's a debut book for this author, and I really, really want you to try it. If you like a bit of a darker romance, I know that it's 1921. That doesn't seem like it'd be for everyone, but it very much still feels historical in the way that they talk, in the way that they act, in the way that they dress. Just not this style. This is the sequel that will be later this year. This one definitely fits the vibe a bit more. But again, if you love Downton Abbey, if you love the mutual pining, but you want it to be a bit sexier, I think this is a really great recommendation. So I actually give this one 4.5 stars. Like I said, the weird suspense element at the end kind of threw me off, and I was like, oh, this was going so well. It could have even been a 6-star book. But this being this author's first book, I was extremely impressed. It's on Kindle Unlimited. Go read this. Give this author some reviews. Give her some love. She actually has a dark billionaire romance coming out next month, and then later this year, she'll have the next book in this series coming out, so definitely check out Stevie Sparks. This one had a 4 on the spice scale for me. Like I said, there was sexual healing. There is actually some, like, bondage. There's blindfolds used. There is some spanking and stuff in here. So Michael's a bit kinky. But it's also a lot of exploration together because Michael was in the war the whole time, and also he has loved Emmeline, and he wasn't really messing around with anyone else while he was in love with her, even when there was no hope of him having her. So we have full-on pining hero who is getting the chance to have his woman. So yeah, 4.5 star, a 4 on the spice scale, all the fun stuff. Again, trigger warnings for rape and sexual assault and death of loved ones in this as well. So thank you so much for watching this week. Thank you for making it all the way through to the end. I hope you will try some of these books. Again, remember, I have links down below. Check out channel memberships or Patreon. I put up 4 videos a week, so definitely tune in for those. Thank you so much for watching, friends, and I'll see you next time. Bye.